Welcome back to the Frith Guild podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm co-host, Scott.
And today, instead of going right into our next book in the series, Master Arcanist, with we're going to be sitting down with none other than author Kacey Ezell.
Hello.
Did I say your name right?
Yep, you sure did.
Okay, awesome. The amount of times that we go back and forth of how names are supposed to be pronounced.
Right, I understand.
And she is the author of the Shadow Card Guardian series, the Shadow Card Guardian book that's up on Royal Roads right now, along with a few other books such as Minds of Men, The World Asunder, and Skies to Conquer. And first, to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how'd you go from flying military helicopters to writing books?
Sure. So my name is Kacey Ezell. I write emotionally charged adventure, fantasy, and science fiction, and I'm really proud of that tagline. I worked really hard on it, so I use it all the time. So I am a retired Air Force helicopter pilot. I flew in the Air Force I served in the Air Force for about 23 years, and then flew most of that time, plus training or whatever. And then after I retired, I flew in the civilian sector for about a year doing EMS helicopter applications, like air ambulance type stuff. And then after that, I retired to write full time. So I got started writing in 2010. I was friends with a guy by the name of John Ringo, who's a pretty well-known military science fiction author. And while I was deployed, he sent me an email asking me if I had any short stories because he was editing an anthology of military science fiction written by military veterans, and he wanted to include some new voices. And I said no, but I can. And so, 24 hours later, I sent him the first draft of the story that became my first pro sale. And then in 15-ish, I think, John once again invited me to contribute a story in his first Black Tide Rising anthology that's set in his zombie apocalypse universe. And I did. And from there, got the attention of a couple of other individuals and publishers, and was invited to contribute to the Four Horsemen universe, which is a indie military science fiction, kind of mech-based, mercenary-based military science fiction shared world universe. So I got involved with that, and at the same time wrote the first book in my first book, which is Minds of Men, my Psyche of War trilogy that I also published through independent publisher Chris Kennedy Publishing. And then it's just been off to the races from there. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And specifically, I know the one we're very interested in is Shadow Card Guardian. So do you want to give a little background on that?
So Shadow Card Guardian is the direct result of me annoying John Stovall. What happened was I became friends with Shammy. I met her when she was a finalist for the Bane Fantasy Award. So she and John came to Dragon Con, where that award is presented. I think not last Dragon Con, but the Dragon Con before. So I think it was in 2023. And that's when I met John and Shammy, and they're wonderful people. They're so much fun. We hung out for the entire evening. Up in Bane Publishing has a hospitality suite for its writers and publishers and editors and stuff, and as of course they invited the finalists for their award to come up and hang out up there, and so that's what we did, and we just spent all night talking and hanging out. So I became friends with Shammy first, and I liked John. I think John liked me, but it's, how it is. It's girls, you're my friend, we're girlfriends, and it's oh yeah, and you're married and your husband's cool too, but you're my friend, So, and then last summer of 24, I had been looking so I'm a hybrid author, right? I publish traditionally with Bane Books, but then I also publish independently with Chris Kennedy Publishing. And I'd been looking to further diversify my career by moving into sort of self-publishing, but also a subscription model of serializing and publishing stories. And I'd been talking with Shammy about that because I'm not sure how we got on the topic, but I found out she, had some knowledge of that sort of thing. And so I was talking with her, and she said, you should go check out Royal Road because there's serialized stories on there, and, people use that as a funnel to pull to their Patreons, and it works out pretty well for people. And I did. I went and looked at Royal Road that evening, and Royal Road is a fantastic site, but it is also there is very low barrier to entry on Railroad, and a lot of people utilize Railroad in a really cool way as sort of like crowdsourcing editing too, right? I was not aware of this. So the first story that I read, I was like, this is really raw. Like that was not what I was prepared for, right? And it wasn't a bad story. It was just raw, right? Like you could tell that, like I said, they were crowdsourcing the editing. So I went back to Shammy and I was like, hey, I need some recommendations because there's a lot on here and I don't know where to start. And I'm looking for something that is pre-edited, pre-polished. And she kind of chuckled and she was like, okay, sure. And she had mentioned that her husband had a story on there. And I was like, and send me John's story too. And she was like, sure. So she sent me a link to Demon Card Enforcer and sent me a link to another very popular story. And I read the first chapter of the very popular story and it was very well written. It wasn't for me. Like it just not my taste, right? And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I went and read the first chapter of Demon Card Enforcer, and I was so hooked because I'm a huge Noir fan. I edited 3 Noir anthologies, right? Like I love Raymond Chandler. That whole thing is my vibe. And so I was like, well, this is amazing. And so I binged it. And I think I read like the whole book like that night, like finishing it like 1 a.m. And then I joined his Patreon so I could read book 2. So I was bowled over by how good the Demon Card Enforcer series was, how amazing the world was, the magic system and the way in which John conceptualized these cards and the rules of the deck building system, the great game and all that. It was fantastic and I loved it. And I reached out again to Shammy, but also directly to John. I was like, bro, this is amazing. Let me share this with all of my audience. Let me tell everyone how good this is. And so we got started talking, and because I was so obsessed with this story of it, at one point, during my like excessive fangirling of the story, I was like, hey man, if you ever want like a special guest star dungeon or something, let me know. I'd love to create something for you. And he was like, well, what are you thinking? And so we started sort of talking, and this was right before DragonCon. So this was the very end of September at this point. And we knew that we were going to see each other at DragonCon. And so he was like, well, if you wanted to do like a short story in the world or something, that'd be awesome. I think my fans would love that. And I was like, dude, I would love that. I think it would be so much fun. And when we went to DragonCon, we started talking about it. And this idea of like, just creating a dungeon to writing a short story, it grew, right? And then the next thing you know, at DragonCon, we're talking about, well, what if you write a whole book? Well, what if you write a whole series and a spin-off? And that's where we kind of came up with the concept of my character, Danny, who is a combat veteran and ER nurse who is taking care of she's adopted her orphaned nephew. And it's actually the nephew who's 14 years old who receives a deck on drop night. So here's this kid with this very powerful deck and a big ass target painted on his back. And this very practical woman who, her whole job is she's got to protect her kid. So, which is a theme that shows up a lot in my fiction, right? I'm a mom, and the theme of, I'll do anything to protect my kids, it shows up a lot in a lot of my stories. So this was just another really fun way to sort of explore that theme in a setting that I loved with a system that I loved. So that's kind of how it got started. John was sort of with me every step of the way. Like I would send him chapters as I would complete them. Like I said, I just annoyed him. And he did the first editing pass on it for me, and kind of, the developmental edits to make sure that it fit within his world's continuity and systems. But also he was really great about sort of advising me about the things that because this is my first experience writing lit RPG. So he did a really good job of kind of telling me, okay, this is something that lit RPG audiences really like. This is something that they really don't like, right? Like, looking at the demographics of the audience and, sort of historically things that have been popular and things that have been unpopular and stuff, like so full of insight. So
now, did you guys schedule like a sit down or a Zoom meeting or something like that to, hey, we're gonna go over these chapters, if they're between edits or things to include, not to include, that kind of thing? I don't know, if like outlining or...
Yeah, so we did have a couple of calls. The thing is, and this is weird for me because I'm usually a pretty dedicated plotter, but I didn't plot this. I didn't pre-outline this story. I wrote this one chapter by chapter, kind of as I went along. And I would send John the chapters as I finished them, and at first he was replying every night, and then he was like, oh, this is going to keep happening. And so in a chunk, like, okay, this section's good. or and it was I mean, he would just put comments in the Word doc, right? Like, this works here, or you should put this here, or don't have her say this, that's going to piss everyone off, stuff like that. But we did have a couple of calls to talk about like the launch process, because I had no clue how to do that, and he was like, all right, this is what you need to do, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4.
I'm pretty sure my biggest takeaway from that is if I know Shammy enough, she'll let me write a book.
I just think that's what you should take away from this, and if you do, please don't say that I told you to do.
I heard from a little
I would
bird.
like to still be friends with Shammy when this podcast is so, yeah. Well, and at the risk of sounding really arrogant, I think one of the things that John liked about the idea was that I was already an established author, kind of with my own audience, with a lot of experience writing novels. And so someone coming from that background and moving into lit RPG I'm finding out it's becoming more and more common as more people sit up and take notice of how popular the genre is. But it's a little rare still at this point. You don't see a lot of who already have somewhat established careers. Now, I'm not a huge name or anything, but I do have an audience, and I do have published works out there. And so I think he was interested to see how would that impact his own readership and his own reach if I came in and brought sort of my audience with me and stuff. So I hope that doesn't sound really, I don't mean to sound arrogant.
No, it does. You learn things from being in the industry regardless of what industry it is. So there's knowledge that you bring to the process. He's not trying to teach you every step along the way. You already are coming in and ready to write. So. Well,
and I was bringing an audience with me too, because I do have a dedicated core group of fans that like my work, and they'll try anything that I write, regardless of whether it's military science fiction or fantasy or lit RPG. And that's somewhat by design. I mean, that's part of the reason why I wanted to diversify my career so much, because I want to try all the genres.
Well, I'm sure it's mutually beneficial for both of you, because John's getting some people over to you, you're getting some people over to John. It works out for both of you, and
I hope so. I hope I've been able to give him at least a little bit more visibility on. Now, where I think that I have helped him has not been on Railroad, obviously, because I was building my Railroad following from zero. But I have a pretty active newsletter, and I send those out weekly. And so my hope is that I was able to really highlight how great his work was through that, mainly through that medium and through my social media posts and stuff. So.
And did you find it more difficult to write in someone else's world as compared to your own? Is there a structure difference you have to follow?
So there is a structure difference that you do have to follow. Here's the thing, though. It wasn't more difficult for me because I've been doing it since the beginning. But it is different than writing your own, than writing your own in your own system, in your own universe, right? Because, when I had to create cards, for example, I would have to run them by John to be like, does this work, or is this going to break your game, right? Because I knew the rules that he had written down, but I didn't know them to such an intimate degree and have quite as full an understanding as he did, obviously, when he came up with all of these things. And also the less concrete pieces of it, like the feel, right? Does this card feel like it works? Does it feel like it matches what these things are? Some of those nuances I really had to check with him. So, obviously, if I was creating my own system, I would be the arbiter of all those things. I would be the final authority of all those things. And it's really funny, too, because one of the things that I've noticed about Railroad readers in particular is that they care so much about stories, which is great, right? But it also, I would get comments because one of the things that we did is one of John's side characters is in Demon Card Enforcer 2 is a guy, he's a police officer named Rhett Walker, right? He's a Joliet police officer. My story is set at the same time as Demon Card Enforcer 1, and I had Rhett show up in my story as a side character as well, and I coordinated all of this with John. And the minute Rhett showed, a lot of my readers were like, hold on, this doesn't work. And I'm like, no, this is a year before Demon Card Enforcer 2. They're like, but he was a Joliet police officer, not a Noir police officer. And I'm like, a year later, yes, he was. I'm like, you guys, I promise I've worked me a little bit, okay?
I checked my facts. I've got my references.
In fact, I even had to put in the summary of my story. I was like, this not only is this written in John Stovall's world, but like he edited this. Like, you guys, he's read every word. He was the first person to read any of all of these things. Like, just trust me. I'm not gonna bring not new with you. And they've been great. I really do appreciate the readers on Road, both those who are silent and also, those who engaged with the story and do me the honor of commenting and reviewing and stuff. So it's great for my author ego.
Now with Road, that's something that I've very recently got even understood was a thing. This is before Demon Card Enforcer 1 came out that I was first introduced to it. I'm not a person that enjoys to read, I don't want to say unfinished works. I like to wait for everything to be complete before I do. Like even with Shami's works, with the Academy series, I don't read anything that she puts out until it's like in my hand in the Kindle or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually the same way. I like writing in the serial format. I think it's fun. It's something different, and there's nuances to how to do it as opposed to writing in a novel format. But I mean, I'm like you. I want to binge the whole thing. Now,
do you are you gonna basically put everything on Royal Roads from now on, or is it something you're just gonna kind of do as you go for this series at the moment?
So at the moment, it's just going to be this series. I think if I do other series that fall into the lit RPG genre, it's entirely possible that I may end up putting those on Royal Road and funneling those to my subscription as well, because that's who is on Royal Road. Now there are all kinds of genres on Royal Road. The largest demographic on Royal Road is the lit RPG audience, right? They're there to read lit RPG and progression fantasy. And so if I write more works that fit into those categories, it's likely that I will probably engage with Royal Road at in some fashion with those. As for like my epic fantasy stuff and my space opera stuff, no. So I have a fantasy adventure coming out in May from Bane Books called Mage Light. That's just being published in the traditional way, coming out in hardcover in May, and then in other formats after that. I'm continuing to publish my space opera trilogy with Chris Kennedy Publishing. I just had a book come out in January in that one, and that one came out in paperback and ebook, and then the audiobook will follow once the narrator gets to it. She's moving through the series. It's like book 5. So
with all these different genres that you just listed, your space opera, your epic fantasy, even dipping your toes into the RPG series, what is your favorite one to write in so far, and what is your preferred to read? Because
what day is it and what mood am I in? I love them all, right? Like, so I unironically refer to myself as being genre fluid because I just can't pick one. I love military science fiction. I love, that's sort of where I got my start and what I was sort of, I don't know, I guess known for. But the truth is, what I wrote wasn't truly mil sci-fi. It had a mil sci-fi flavor to it because I have a military background and I would include a lot of those details in my story. But it was usually an adventure story rather than a true mil sci-fi story. If we want to split hairs and get right down to brass tacks about it. I mean, again, I can't pick one, man.
Okay.
Here's what I do love, though. There are certain things that I need in the stories that I write and that I read. Because I write the stories I want to read, right? And I think at a certain level, most of us do. I need an adventure. I need compelling characters who have emotional connections with other characters and with the events going on around them. That's why, I say I write emotionally charged adventure fiction because, that's where I'm at. That's what I love. I love stories. No disrespect if this is your jam, but I am not a grimdark fan. I love stories that end with some kind of note of hope, even if it's a Pyrrhic victory, right? Even if it's, the hope is it has to be there has to be something there. I don't like stories where it's not my thing. Grimdark's not my thing.
It is very tough to close the book and be like, yeah, that was the end. Ooh,
I feel bad, and I don't want to feel bad about it, right? But the other thing, like one of the things that I'm a huge fan of is I actually read a lot of romance, and because I don't tend to read the genre that I'm writing while I'm writing it because I want to keep my story kind of separate from what I'm reading, and it gives my brain a break, if that makes sense. And I don't include romance subplots for sure, but I don't don't write pure romance, right? So I read a lot of romance because, again, it's like the comfort read. It's something to let my brain sort of, relax and enjoy while I'm consuming that.
Do you
read Onyx Storm?
I haven't read Onyx Storm. I've read the first two. I have not yet read Onyx Storm.
Do you have a character from your books that you feel best embodies you, or is like, yes, that's my ideal character?
So they're all part of me, right? Like they all come from me. It's interesting that you say that because right now the two works that I'm working on is the first one is the sequel to Shadow Card Guardian, Shadow Card Guardian 2. And the main character in that one is Danny, who is very tough, very practical, very like she will unapologetically burn a city down to save her kid, right? That is an aspect of me for sure. But then my other story that I'm working on is the sequel to Mage Light, which is that fantasy I mentioned that's coming out in May. And in that one, the main character, Alice, she is a person who, now this is not true of me. I had a wonderful childhood. My parents are amazing. But she's a person who had a difficult childhood. Her mother was a narcissist, and all her life has been told that she's just not good enough. She's just not good enough. And so she's, as an adult, she's trying very hard to let go of, those insecurities and really sort of trust in herself and what she is capable of doing. And while I don't have that same, traumatic background as the character does, I think on a certain level, all of us have experiences that have made us insecure, and that we have to have, sort of this journey of trying to overcome those experiences. And what's so interesting about that is that the two characters are almost diametrically opposed in that, right? It's not that Danny doesn't have insecurities. She has plenty of insecurities. She's just like, well, I got to do what I got to do. You know what I mean? And Alice, it's not that she isn't willing to do what she has to do, but she just doesn't trust herself the way that Danny does yet. And so those are both different aspects of my personality. Sometimes I do fully trust myself, and sometimes I don't. And I think that that's probably the case with most people.
Do you write with a group, or do you write by yourself typically, or get together once a week or once a month with other authors? Do you kind of just hermit yourself in?
Yes, all of the above happens. So I feel like that's my answer for all of your questions is like, yes, all of those things.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Again, it's very mood based, right? So we do have a group of there's a group of women that, not just women. We have a couple of token dudes who come and join us. But we will, I have a fan Discord that ended up somehow being mostly writers rather than fans. But we'll go on my Discord in one of the chat channels, and we'll like video chat. But we won't actually, we'll do like writing sprints there where we mute our mics and everybody writes for a defined period of time, usually 25 minutes. And then once the timer goes off, then we'll take a break and we'll chat about what we did. And sometimes it's just something about like co-working with someone, being there, kind of with someone that really sort of motivates you to, okay, let me put everything else aside and focus on the story that's in front of me. And we've been pretty successful doing that. I do a lot of collaborative writing. Like my most recent release, other than Shadow Card Guardian, was Blood of Her Father, which I co-wrote with Marisa Wolf, who is she's probably my best friend. She's another good friend of Shammy's. We're all part of like this same group of women writers that we cheerlead for each other. It's really fun and silly, but
it's awesome though. Like you need.
Well, we try to support each other, right? Like it's like, oh, you're a cool girl. You're a cool girl. All right, let's be cool girls together and support each other. But yeah, so when I was writing with Marisa, that project, I've been writing with Marisa for many, many years, and so we know each other so well that the process of writing was very. Like we were like in the same document, passing it back and forth. I'd write a paragraph, she'd write a paragraph. It was just. And it just clicked, and it was so much fun. It felt like magic happening, So sometimes I'm writing it with a group, and sometimes it's just me in my office typing away. So
one of those moments of, did we just become best friends?
Yeah. I think that happened like 20 years ago with me and Maurice, and nothing has changed, right?
All right.
It's funny. I'm actually at a convention right now in Boston. She's one of my roommates, so.
Don't talk too loud.
No, we went downstairs to the bar. It's fine. So.
And any advice that you would give to up-and-coming authors? Things you wish you would have known?
Trust yourself, right? You have to build your career. You have to develop your voice. It's not going to be what you want it to be right at first, but you have to continue. You have to write the stories you want to write. You have to write the books that you want to write. You have to take care of yourself and your creative spark in order to continue progressing, right? You level up with, to use lit RPG terms, you level up with every novel that you write. So write your novels. Even if you have the opportunity to work with someone else in their world, I'm not going to tell you not to do it because I've had a lot of success doing that. But I will tell you that if you only do that and don't make the time, not take the time, but make the time to invest in your own stories and in the idea that light you up from the inside as well, you are doing yourself a disservice and you will not progress your career that way. Only you can write your career, right?
It is.
No one else can do it. You can't follow anyone else's steps perfectly. You have to forge your own to a certain degree.
And I think the lit RPG comparison is perfect because like you have to get the experience to get to the next thing. Like it's not as clearly defined as we wish it was like a lit RPG, but
right.
You do have to get the experience before you're going to be able to level up.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
All right. And before we conclude today's interview, we're going to do a Rizzle round. So one or two are a Rizzle round.
Okay.
It's going to be basically just a quick one word answer kind of responses. So.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay. Let's do it.
So what house in Hogwarts would you be in?
Ravenclaw.
Nice. I think you answered this earlier, but you're a plotter or pantser?
Plotter, unless I'm writing lit RPG.
Hardcover or ebook?
Ebook.
Tea or coffee?
Neither. Red Bull.
I support that.
Favorite writing spot?
My office.
Villains or anti-heroes?
Which villain? Okay, so in general, anti-heroes, because again, I like hope. I like people to be redeemable. Yeah, so we'll go with anti-heroes. But some villains are really hot. That's the dark romance reader in me.
Board or video games?
Depends on the day and who I'm with.
And then one sentence that kind of captures your writing style.
I write emotionally charged adventure fantasy and science fiction.
Tip my hat to that. And then this one, it's more, you can take a couple minutes if you want to think about it. If your protagonist had a theme song from any of your series, what character would it be and what song?
God, I had this just a minute ago. This is one of the male main characters of Mage Light. Okay, his name is Vil. He's definitely an anti-hero type, and his theme song would be "Throne" by Saint Mason. So go look it up on YouTube. It's breathtaking.
I love that you have those already ready to go.
Well, I heard it the other day, and I was like, "This is Vil's song. I love it." Yeah. So, yeah.
Awesome.
If I had to choose one for Danny from Shadow Card Guardian, it might be. I don't know.
It's tough off the cuff. There's a lot of songs out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I want to say something like Gimme Shelter, right? Because she's kind of a classic rock chick, you know? But something, yeah, it might be Gimme Shelter. It might be that.
Very nice.
Now, when is Shadow Card Guardian expected to be released?
So, sometime in March. This will be my first self-published novel, and I'm trying to learn what I'm doing. We're targeting March. Sometime in March, it should come out in ebook and paperback, and also in audiobook. So,
all right. And then where else can we find you at? I know we have Discord, Roll Roads.
Yeah. So the best place to start looking for me is at CaseyEzell.net. That's my website. If you go there, you'll get like a big pop-up that says "Join Kacey's Dragon's Horde," which is my membership. It has a free tier, and by joining that, you'll get like my weekly newsletter that tells you about all the things that I'm doing and stuff, and has all of my socials, links and stuff. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Shadow Card Guardian is available right now on Royal Road. If you do join my newsletter, then you get the link to the Discord, and you can come hang out with me there and stuff. So I'm also on X, Kacey's all one. So all that stuff's in the newsletter. So the best place to start is joining the free tier of the Dragon's Hoard. And then if you like it and you decide you want to read early chapters, then you can look at some of the paid tiers, because I would love to allow you to give me your money.
Hey, I get it.
So, but you can read for free too on Royal Road. So either way.
And speaking about Discord, I also wanted to mention to everybody that the Arc Discord, or Arc Dragon's Nest, I could never remember the name of this Discord channel. The Arc Dragons server. It is a server on Discord for those that are indie authors as well, trying to get their works Arc reviewed and or get their books out there to people. So they have literally quite every kind of genre you can possibly think about on there, to include splatterpunk, which, Scott, I did verify that is a genre that they put up on there. So no idea what it is, but it's up there. So
What it's in, like.
So I will put that in the link as well, along with all of Kacey's social medias and her website as well. And with that, Kacey, was there anything else you'd like to add today?
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was so much fun. I'm honored to, be part of this community, even as sort of this crazy blue-haired side piece. I don't know. No, that's not what I meant. Anyway, thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. With that, we will catch you guys next week as we start into Master Arcanist, the 7th book in Shammy's series. So we'll catch you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening.